Mike Johnson has always been weak. Such a shame that we can't get strong leadership from the Republicans. Keep in mind, folks, that President Donald Trump this morning endorsed Mike Johnson to be Speaker, to be reelected, which the vote is expected to be taken on Friday. President Trump praising him, saying we need him as our Speaker to move forward. Of course, we got to have a Speaker. We can't go for weeks like we did when Mike Johnson eventually won on, like, what was it, the 15th ballot or so, because we can't certify the results of the election till we have a Speaker. Texter says Speaker Johnson did not need to open the continuing resolution to allow the Dems to add all that pork barrel crap. He did it because he still thinks that we have to play nice with these people. They wouldn't have opened it up for us because they play to win. Pure stupidity on Johnson's part that can't be tolerated. That probably was a mistake, yes. He should not have allowed that continuing resolution, the spending bill. Reportedly, it was like 21 pages when we started. It was basically going to get the amount of funding needed to keep the government running until Trump could be inaugurated into March. And then it grew to over 1,500 pages, full of all kind of pork barrel projects. And I agree. Speaker Johnson should not have allowed that. The American people spoke very clearly on November the 5th. We're tired of that kind of thing. Texter says Mike Johnson has done a terrible job. He needs to go. It will do us no good that Trump won if we don't get someone as Speaker that is in cahoots with the Democrats. Mike is a rhino. He has proven that. If you can't see that when you need to review his job, then you need to review his job as a Speaker. You know, some of these text messages have come in after the breaking news this morning that President Trump has endorsed Speaker Johnson. Does it change your mind at all? Or you still think we need to have that fight in the House now? Texter says, yeah, Joey, the only New Year's resolution I make is not to make a New Year's resolution. Well, you're part of the over half of Americans who told Pew Research just that. They didn't make New Year's resolutions because they knew they couldn't keep them, so rather than make them, they just don't go down that path. The South Korean airliner that crashed over the weekend claimed the lives of 179 people. This was an early morning flight, commercial airliner. 2 people survived. Both were crew members. Early reports suggest that the aircraft, it was a Boeing 737-800. It was en route from Bangkok. May have been struck by a bird. It was unclear, according to reports, whether it was the engine or elsewhere, maybe the cockpit window. The control tower received a mayday from the pilots. 5 minutes later, the plane reached the runway but failed to deploy its landing gear, which, as a former pilot, I'm not active anymore, that's what is the big question here concerning why he did not deploy the landing gear. A bird strike, in most cases, would not have affected the landing gear. And if you watch the video of the landing too, they typically when you're going to do a belly landing, which is what he did, you give yourself plenty of runway. He landed midway through the field, which of course he didn't have enough runway at that speed. Even though landing on the belly of the plane slows you down pretty quickly, it wasn't enough before he hit the wall and the plane exploded into flames. So a lot of questions. I'm sure there'll be more investigation on that as well. Outgoing Senator Joe Manchin wrote a scathing post about President Joe Biden after he granted clemency to the 37 prisoners on federal death row who received life sentences instead of their death sentence. Manchin called it horribly misguided and insulting, especially regarding the 2 men convicted of murdering a student at Marshall University. The Democrat turned independent, and again, he is retiring, said that he felt a moral obligation to speak out against the the outgoing president on behalf of the parents of Samantha Burns, who was a 19-year-old girl who was killed in November of 2002. Her remains have never been found. Manchin said her family wrote letters to Biden pleading with him not to pardon the murderers. Like many others, like 37 others, Joe Biden ignored them. Manchin wrote on X, "After speaking to Samantha Burns' parents, I believe it is my duty to speak on their behalf and say President Biden's decision to commute the death sentences for the two men convicted in her brutal murder is horribly misguided and insulting, particularly since Samantha's family wrote letters to President Biden and the Department of Justice pleading for them not to do this, but their concerns went unheard. I can't imagine the grief that Candy and John Burns are reliving and dealing with during this holiday season. As their U.S. Senator and a father, I wanted to express my deepest sympathy for the continued suffering. Please know that Samantha will be forever in our prayers." This a reaction, just like a lot of other reactions, from people who think that Joe Biden really doesn't care about the victims of these horrible crimes. Some of these men who he is going to allow to sit and literally rot in prison now did some horrible things. A family from my home state of South Carolina in the Myrtle Beach area, their daughter was murdered brutally. They begged and pleaded with the Biden administration not to do this, but he did it anyway. It's like their complaint was that they had like a 10-minute Zoom call with someone from the Biden Department of Justice, and it was like they never even spoke with them. They completely ignored their pleas to keep this man on death row. And you know, Biden's excuse was, well, he needed to show some grace to these men. How did he choose not to grant clemency to 3 of them, though? If he feels that it was morally wrong for some to use the death penalty, how does he justify killing 3 of the 40?